the three items that we have tonight, we have three regulation amendments that are in various stages of review. The first one is A-22-5. This is the regulation amendment for inclusionary zoning. Everyone, just for ease, I've put a paper draft of the amendment of all three of these, actually, of the drafts on your desks. And Mariah, for folks who join in video, I'll make sure I share my screen.
They're uploaded too, so I read them online.
Yep, they are. Switching my screen share there. So the draft that you have in front of you, everyone should have in front of you, and it's up on the screen, has only one very simple change from what we originally started the public hearings with. Under section 8.8.b, applicability, that section is one sentence that reads, "These regulations shall apply to all zones within the town of Ridgefield." Used to be period. Now we've added town of Ridgefield, comma, except our AAA and our AA. Other than that, this what you have drafted and what we have up on the screen is exactly the same as what we've been discussing before. I think, if I can summarize, and then I'll just open up for anybody's discussion, I think based on what we heard in the hearings, there were a couple of different suggestions or proposals for what to change. A lot of that came down to a feeling that in areas, particularly in the AA and the AAA, it just wouldn't make sense to build an affordable single-family home by the numbers. And I remember, by the way, I brought it because to me it was really helpful. Project X from one of our local builders, Sankubi, right? His last name, Rich Sankubi, shared this. So he shared his numbers, and really illustrated that his point was, if you build a 4-bedroom, 3,000 square foot home on 2.25 acres in Ridgefield, or 2.25 acres. Today, you try to sell it for about 1.7 million. That's what his number was. I'm not saying whether or not that's right, but he said you'd sell that for about 1.7 million. It would cost the developer about 1.3 to build the home, 1.4 to 1.385. Developer would make about 138,000 in gross profit to make 10%. And and if you said that one of 4 homes on such a lot needed to be affordable, if they wanted to hold their same gross profit, they actually still wanted to make the same amount of money, they'd have to sell those same homes for 2.1 million.
Right, or make any money. I mean, they would, and plus
They would lose money unless they moved the
Yes.
price to 2.1
which
million.
no one would buy for. So
Yeah. No,
And that's because of the fee in lieu that we currently have in the document.
no,
that's without the fee.
that's not regarding the fee in lieu.
Oh, no,
That's-
sorry, yep,
That's just basically making the 4 homes, one of them affordable,
affordable.
and still holding his gross profit, as it was before.
And
So-
then sorry, I mean,
Go
just
ahead.
finish it. Like,
Yep.
if no one on earth would buy a house at that level for 2.whatever million, then the project is null and void. Like, they wouldn't even start the project
Right,
because that would be ridiculous.
right.
Which is true and valid. And
Yeah.
so, what would they do on that lot, if anything?
Well, under our draft regulation, they would have the option to buy out of delivering the affordable by doing the payment in lieu of, but our payment in lieu of is 300% of the Danbury AMI, which is 134,000. So 300% of that is about 400,000. And the developer's not actually making much more than 400,000 in this scenario.
If even that, so that negates it as well.
Well, it's not if that. I can think of the exact number if you want.
No, I mean, they won't even make a profit. When you
They
said
would
they
make-
would barely,
They would make $554,000, including recording. That's his own number.
Right, but that's a very wishy-washy maybe number. Like, it's
Yeah.
never set in
Well,
stone.
I'm just trying to summarize what the testimony was. I'm not making.
Oh, yeah, no. I guess I'm just saying, I'm just driving home the point that it would never be worth it in either case for a developer to build on that lot.
Right. So I'm trying to summarize
Sorry,
what
sorry.
was said rather than make the argument. So that developer would have to make about 500,000, and his point was that, yeah, that's not worth it. But they would make the same profit either way, but you'd have to be able to sell the homes for 2.1 million. So yes, our regulation had a 300% fee in lieu of, and I think, this kind of summary of his testimony was that was too high to make it worthwhile. So I think there were a couple of different ideas that were thrown out. One was to limit the areas where this would apply, and this is the simple draft that you have in front of you. It's just to make this regulation apply everywhere except RAAA and RAA. I think there was another proposal that was talked about by a couple different people about reducing the payment in lieu of, and still having it apply throughout throughout all areas in town. So I have an alternative proposal that holds the kind of application across all zones in town, but makes the payment in lieu of 200% instead of 300%. And we could talk about that. But I think that was one debate that we still need to have, and obviously we have opinions. The other thing that we need to discuss is there were some concerns or some suggestions about a project, about making the number being 14% affordable for 4 or more units. It's really messy, especially below 10 units. The rounding becomes really close to 830G levels. So then you have a situation where developers are basically just incentivized to go to 830G because you're sometimes talking about the same number of units. So we drafted up a table, if everybody remembers. I'll pass these around again. And the table, instead of doing percentages at the low numbers, and I can put it on the screen, actually just says there's a minimum number of units. So that, and in some cases, to be transparent, when you look at the number instead of the percentage, it ends up being like 2 units in the case of an 11-unit project is 18%. Right? So it's slightly higher, but if you made it 14, it would still be 1, and it'd be the lower number. So the table works at the lower numbers. And so I have a table here, which I'll pass around again, and I'll show it on the screen, but I think that's the second big category of discussion is, do we want to replace the 14% with a table like this? And so then this table makes sense. But I'll show it now and just go around, but I think those are the two main topics. Maybe it's 3 because it's kind of the zones / the payment in lieu and the 14% versus the table. I'm sure there's other small things, but I feel like those are the big items.
I guess I'll start.
Yeah, okay. I'll pass these around in the meantime.
I would like to discourage people from using the payment in lieu option, because I think we talked about it doesn't really do anything anyway, and we decided I'd rather see the actual affordable units existing. So the idea we passed around of have it applicable everywhere in every zone, but then make the fee lower, I think that's going opposite. Like that's the opposite of what I'd like to see. I'd rather, as much as I would like to be applicable everywhere, I recognize that it's not really possible, and then the example that we decided is some of these residential zones. So I think this is the simplest solution. If you exclude these zones, but you make the fee high enough that people aren't going to actually do that and actually give us the affordable units, I think that's probably the simplest and best. I think what you have here is probably best. And then for the table, I think that having a number is fine as long as you say whether it rounds up or rounds down or clarify anything you have to, but how big would the table be? Would you enumerate out every single number up to like 30?
Yeah, actually, that's what you kind of have to do. I'll bring it up on the screen because I know that font right there is pretty small. The numbers are actually so close to each other at the low end. In the rounding, 1 versus 2 units is really, and sometimes 3 when you're up in the teens is what you're talking about at the 14% level. If you just, if you want to look at the screen, it might be easier for folks with hard on the eyes. So this table here says, okay, if you have a number of units, it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, at 14%, if you're rounding, it goes one way, and if you're rounding up, it goes another way, but it's basically one unit until you get to 7, and then it's 2, until you get to 15, and then it's 3 is the 14%. But if you go over here to the right, you see how close that is to being basically a 30G level.
Yeah.
So back to this, on the far left, this is what I'd suggest we actually do is hard code. There's the minimum, 1s, 2s, and you see what the 830G level is. So you keep them separated. The
Yeah, I think
minimum
that's
and
fine,
incentive
just to
level.
be, yeah, to be clear, just say, here's the number, and then you don't have to worry about someone doing the math, you just say, this many units, this many,
Yeah. And once you get above 30, then it starts, and by the way, we had testimony also about this, I think it was Dr. Lipton, who actually testified in our inclusionary zoning. He said, look, on a bigger project, like the one I'm proposing now and ones that I work on, like on the bigger projects, this inclusionary requirement's not as big of a deal financially, once you get to the point you're making. You know, Mr. Zincudi's numbers, if you multiply that by, 20 more units,
Yeah.
30 more units, it starts to become, okay, you can designate a few. So, by the way, I guess maybe these three things actually all tug on each other, like, you could actually keep it across all zones, but make it so that the threshold is a higher number of units. But I know we have a lot of variables here, so I don't know.
And again, if it's in residential, and they're only building 3 or 4 houses, then the percentage doesn't really matter, it's still a large portion of the project, so.
Right. Elizabeth, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I feel strongly, like Joe does, about the, keeping the zones out and not changing the financial, payment.
I think it looks to keep all the zones in.
No, you don't want to keep all the zones in and change,
Oh, maybe I wasn't clear, I said,
You didn't want to lower the payment in lieu.
Right.
No, I think this draft is good, I think this is,
Yeah.
I think I started saying I would like to see it, ideally
Right.
apply everywhere, but I don't think it's really practical. We saw in the example that it doesn't really make sense. So
That's-
in that case, I'd rather exclude these 2 zones instead of lowering the fee.
That's
Okay.
exactly what I'm agreeing with, yeah. I
Okay.
agree very strongly with that, and I also wonder, like, even in RA zone, like, if someone could build 4 units, I bet they couldn't afford it either, you know what I mean? But if they could build 6 or 8, maybe they could. So I'm a little, about the 4 units as well, but,
What, you're saying you would, to increase the number of
yeah, I
units?
might go up to 5 or 6 or something, because I think it's gonna be almost impossible even at that level. If you think of the developments we've had in the RA zone, like in town, like the Elms or across the street, maybe the Elms could make, I don't know how many units they have, like, I don't know, 8? They have a lot, so maybe they could work for them, but the other ones for sure no, right? Like, maybe they could change the way they build them. So if any, I want to keep the fee in lieu. I want to keep it out
Keep a
of
high fee in lieu.
high fee in lieu, keep it out of our AA and our AAA. And I would even maybe go for a higher number of dwellings.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at the chart again, so it's one's required up until you get to 8, I think, right?
That's
Or
right,
7, 8,
yeah,
and then you go to 2.
yeah. No, 2 steps in at 11 units.
Oh,
If you look on your left, it's up on the screen. Maybe one's bigger.
oh, I was looking at the 14%.
Oh, if we kept it at 14%, then yes. But this is where I'm saying
Oh,
you're pretty close to the 830G level.
oh, I see, yeah.
So this is the suggested chart is over here.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to keep it,
I see, okay, gotcha.
we're just trying to keep it less than 8-30.
Get less number of units,
Yes.
because the rounding gets really funny at the small numbers. Like, you're one out of 5 units is 20%.
Right,
So that's pretty close already to 830G, which would be 2
yeah.
out of 5.
No, because they'll just jump to 32 units, it's easier.
Exactly.
So at 7 units, it becomes equal to our 14%.
Yes, but then it goes to 30, and then if you see up, down a little lower, it suddenly becomes 18, 17%. Because again, you're having like step changes.
Yeah.
But I think that raising the minimum number of units is one of the smarter things we could do too. I think when we originally talked about this,
Yeah,
we were talking about 5 or so.
Yeah.
So I think you're the one that originally said that.
I know.
Because you're thinking big, you're being ambitious, but now we kind of see
Yeah,
how the numbers look.
yeah. Yeah, I might jump to 6 or
So with this table, you're saying it's at the larger number of units, it's a higher percentage than 14, but at the smaller number of units, you're making that step higher up, so it's only 1 unit before you step up.
something.
I'm sorry, explain the
So
question.
at the top of the table with fewer units, you're having the minimum be 1 for farther down, so it's like
Right.
a lower percentage, but then lower down the table, it's a higher percentage than the 14 if you just did the straight 14%.
Yes, because the same thing, like, you get close to the 830G level.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm trying
I
to
see what
create,
you're doing,
I'm
yeah.
trying to create progression
Yeah.
in the table without triggering being so close to the 830G level, like, if you see 19 units or 20 units, we could literally talk about this line by line if you all wanted. I went down and did it myself, but like at 19 or 20 units, okay, 830G is 6 units for both 19 or 20. Now, keep in mind that's 6 on the blend that 830G requires, and we're not requiring the same blend
Yeah.
of the low income and the super low income.
Mhm.
But what our regulation would say, okay, you don't need to do 6, obviously, because that's 830G, but you have to do 3. So that puts it enough distance away from 830G that it makes sense, hopefully. And no, it's not 14%, in that case,
Sounds
it's,
like 15.
16 or 15%.
But
But
no
it's-
matter what you call the number, it's gonna be probably the same number anyway, so.
Yeah,
Yeah, I see what you did there, that makes sense.
So this is the 8-30G, not this.
yes.
Okay, so that's what, they're out of alignment here, so that's why I was looking.
Yep.
Okay.
Column E, if you look up on the screen, that's the 830G.
The one
That's what
with-
830G would require.
With the double zeros after it,
Yeah,
okay.
with the double
So what
zeros.
is the second one that it says incentives? Is that just?
Well, remember in our regulation, we've got what's called the basic requirement, that you have to do, mandatory number of, and then there's an option to, if the developer wants to step up and do more, then the commission has discretion to give certain incentives in terms of, like leniency on setback or whatnot, dimensional requirements.
It's all discretionary.
It's discretionary, remember, so it's not anything that's as of right.
Mhm.
So that's the incentive level.
Yeah, I like your chart.
No, that's pretty. For the record, we're just joined by Commissioner Katz and Commissioner Neji in the room. And just to very quickly orient you to, we have in front of you the actual printed draft regulations for IZ, for the EV, electric vehicles, and for signage. All 3 are in front of you. The IZ draft that you have in front of you there's an underlined section right under applicability that basically says these regulations shall apply to all zones within the town of Ridgefield except RAAA and RAA is an add. That's the only add to the document versus the original that we've drafted. I did highlight a few other sections in yellow highlight that I thought people were going to talk about, mainly the payment in lieu, or the fee in lieu, sorry, and the number of dwelling units, because we have had some discussion about whether or not 4 is the correct cutoff point.
What's the new proposal? Are you proposing 5 or 6?
I'm
or
proposing 6.
6?
And we were just going around the room, by the way, and Joe Daldell said, he's not a big supporter of reducing the payment in lieu. That was one of the suggestions, that we could reduce the payment in lieu so that, in our AAA or AA or really valuable place, that a developer could more easily buy their way out of developing the affordable unit. Joe's not in favor of that. He would prefer, that we exclude the zones, and otherwise this looks good. Commissioner DeSalvo feels the same about excluding those zones. And then also we got into the conversation around the minimum number, which she's suggesting maybe the right minimum number is closer to 5 or 6. And the table, rather than doing a percentage, the table, which is up here on the screen on the left, table might make more sense than the numbers. Because remember, the 14%, it's a little funny at the low numbers, the low quantity of units. The rounding is problematic. So that's, and Sue, I think you were kind of just talking when people walked in, so sorry to interrupt you.
So I just asked a question about that. So I like the idea of the chart, making it simple, I like that. And I like, because people can then clearly see that it's less, so that they don't automatically just jump to the 8-30G. I prefer to keep the number lower, because that 5 is on that regulation we have with the cul-de-sac, access way. So it's just making it easier, then we'll just get a bunch more of those, and not get any affordable units, and that seems to be a popular formula, so I would like to keep it at the formula. I just sort of had a question about if we were to exclude those zones, does that then encourage more building in those zones? So that kind of, that's just taking away our green space in town.
Ask that question again, would you?
I asked a question, I'm sorry, about if we were to exclude, since that's on the table, the possibility to exclude our AAA and our AA zones, then does that just encourage overbuilding in those areas and taking away green space, which is in our POCD, that people want to preserve that? That just makes that more alluring, because then they can sidestep a fee and they can sidestep affordable units. So then we haven't accomplished anything but taking away green space.
But I feel like, I'm sorry to interrupt, I feel like though, if there's truly a, say, 20-acre property out there, and someone's gonna put 4 or 5 houses on it, but then they are countering this rule, they might go to 830G instead, because it's not worth it to create 4 or 5 houses on that lot, right, John? I mean, so that might trigger people instead to build a big project on that property, instead of, say, 4 or 5 houses, which might fit into the neighborhood better. Is that abhorrent? I mean, if someone's gonna build on the property either way, and they can't afford to build 4 or 5 simple homes, then they're either gonna sell the property, nothing's gonna happen, or they might be triggered to build an 832 project on the property.
Or they could build 1 less unit and have a little more green space around the houses, instead of just going exactly to that 3 acres, maybe leave 4 acres there, and then they can upcharge for that house because the property would have more land.
If they can get their money back.
I think we should probably go to the regular meeting if we continue.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, so for the record, and we said this in the beginning, we were in a special meeting for the first 30 minutes because we don't normally have a meeting scheduled at 6:30. So we need to adjourn from this meeting, and we'll immediately move to the regular meeting. We did put on the agenda for the regular meeting, the first item on the agenda is continuation of any business in the special meeting. So this is mostly procedural, but at 7:05, unless there's an objection from the commissioner, I'd like to adjourn this meeting. Actually, I should probably, since this is a special meeting, I should probably get a motion to adjourn. All right? So can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, now I need a second.
Yes.
All right, the motion's been made by Mr. Dowdell, seconded by Mr. Katz to adjourn the special meeting. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? All right, any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Meeting's adjourned at 7:05. At 7:05 in 1 second. I'll call the regular meeting to order of the Planning and Zoning Commission of the Town of Richfield Tuesday, April 18th. For the record, we have the following commissioners present in the room. Myself, Mr. Hendrick, Commissioner Dowdell, the Vice Chair, Commissioner Katz is here present in the room, Commissioner Constantino is here in the room, Commissioner Neji is in the room, and Commissioner Elizabeth DeSalvo is in the room. We also have online Commissioner O'Cronley. We are only missing Commissioner Molyneux and Serena. Serena was excused because he had a baby the last couple of weeks. Wait, I'm sorry, he didn't have a baby, he had a grandchild.
I thought that was gonna make news, Jesus.
No, he had a grandchild. I did say it right the last time. Okay, so we're gonna continue our agenda. I think we're getting toward the end of inclusionary zoning. We have two other things real quickly, and then we'll move to the rest of the agenda. So, sorry.
And then,
Sue.
and then,
Anything else, Sue?
no, not lowering, I'm not in favor of lowering the percentage either, so I agree with you guys on that, I guess.
Lowering the percentage or the payment?
Not, the payment alone, yeah,
Or the
I don't
payment?
want to lower the.
Okay.
I like the chart, and then I made the other two comments on the zoning, because I'd like to keep it at 4 more units, and I'm still just questioning. I see your point, Elizabeth, and I see the point that I stated about the RAAA and the RAAA, so I feel like that might need a little bit more discussion right there.
Mr. Neji, you want to say anything about inclusionary zoning?
First of all, sorry I'm late. I could have sworn that there was something I
You gotta
said.
talk louder.
No, I said, I'm apologizing that I was late. And I could have sworn there was something at 6:30, then I went to the agenda and checked, it started at 7, so I said, okay. So, I mean, the special meeting, I don't think we had an agenda for it.
Oh, yes, we did.
We did.
Yeah,
Oh, we
sorry you
did.
didn't say
Okay,
it,
then I
but we
missed
did
that.
have it.
I missed that, so
Your hands are on it.
It's a separate document.
I think in terms of lowering the numbers, I sort of agree with Dowd, that we should keep it, where it is. Because
Which numbers, sorry, because we have a bunch of different things.
the penalty to,
The fee.
The penalty, the
Yes.
payment in lieu of.
yes, in lieu of,
Yeah,
because in fact, if I go back by what I learned also or what I read, even with the penalty that's being paid now, it's not really that big enough to do anything with it for most of the towns that collect that penalty. So I think lowering it, defeat the purpose.
Mr. Katz, anything?
I would echo that. I think what Dan is saying makes sense.
Ms. O'Cronley, we can't forget about you, even though you're on Zoom. Anything to add?
Well, I guess my question is on the zones, the RAA and RAAA. The zones aren't perfect, I guess, is that correct? In terms of, in terms of coverage, are we really only excluding single-family homes if we do that, and is that what we want to do?
Well, just to clarify your question, do you mean what is actually built on those lots today? Are there only single-family homes in the RAA and RAAA? Is that the question?
Yes.
There are, so I can give you the answer. I'm looking at Alice in case I say something stupid, but I think there's certainly examples in the RAA and AAA where there are non-compliant, non-conforming, I think it's the right, legally non-conforming uses. So, one example that I know because I drive there every day is, Ridgefield Academy, right, the school that, I think that's AAA, and I don't think that would normally be conforming. And I'm sure there's lots of other examples, but they're there because they're grandfathered. Sometimes where you have something other than a single-family home in those lots. And remember, educational and religious uses are often allowed by special permit in our
Right.
AAA, AA. So, for example, we just did the market up in Ridgebury also, and that's a good example of one where, that's not residential, but we've given a special permit to allow that.
Well, I think the question I had in that regard is what % of the land is zoned this RAAA and RAA? What percent that we exclude.
What percent of our land area is R double A or R triple A? You probably have, you can do that on GIS pretty quickly without that.
3/4.
I don't know.
What is that, 75%?
I think so.
I would guess it's pretty high, I wouldn't have guessed 3/4, but I would guess like more than 50% of that.
Probably.
It's a significant amount
Yeah,
of the land of
that
town.
would be my question. So if we have a regulation that's applied to very small, question, are we gonna get the effect of one?
I am partial to keeping the number of dwelling units lower, because if the goal is affordable, it's so rare that large buildings are built in town. We don't have a lot of 6+ unit buildings, I'd rather keep it at 4+. But another wrinkle I'd like to flag is switching to area versus state median income. Sorry, I have a small human with me. And switching from area to state so that it is more, I know it won't count for 830G, but it will make it more accessible to people of maybe slightly higher incomes, but that live in this area already.
So for that, you mean what you're talking about when you talk about the switch? In their current draft, the requirement is that the units that are the affordable units, that's actually a defined term in section C1 of the regulation. Right now, we define those affordable units as either assisted housing or set-aside development as defined by 830G, section 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes. So you're saying that, so that language makes the requirement that these affordable units would follow the state's logic, which is the lesser of area or state median income. And what Ms. O'Connell is saying is that she would like us to explore just making it the area median income, a reference to the area median income, instead of going with the state's definition, which would be the lesser of.
I see the argument for both, but I think there is, I don't want to just immediately say, okay, we should do the 830G to get credit. Yes, I do value getting credit, but my goal is to put more people who live in Ridgefield that maybe don't make a lot of money, but maybe not as low as the state median income, into housing in town, the ability to stay here, move here at different income levels.
It also makes sense because the fee in lieu is hooked to the Danbury, Connecticut HUD Metro FMR area median income, not the state.
I think that's just to create a number,
I know, but
a financial number.
that's the area median instead of the state, so maybe that makes sense.
Okay, that would be a new thing that nobody's discussed before, so do we want to go around the room to talk about that? So we're at the point now where we really got to drive consensus. That's what I'm trying to do, is distill to what our issues are and get some clarity so that we can.
Is our goal to finalize this tonight?
Well, I think our goal is to walk out tonight knowing what we need to redraft, so that then we can vote. And so I don't mean to be short-tempered, but at the same time, we've got the clock's ticking, we got another 45 minutes down on this one issue. And I think we need to get to a point where we have, where we know where at least 5 votes are gonna go in favor on an issue. So do we have 5 people that wanna say?
Do we want to vote point by point, maybe?
Well,
Yeah.
so what we need to do ultimately is have a motion to draft with certain changes. So I'm trying to get there. That's what we actually need, is a motion, to draft with changes. So we have a draft, the one that came here to the table, which I think other than inserting the matrix, the table, this one, which excludes R AAA and R AA, sounds like it's got at least 4 or 5, maybe 6 votes, right? This draft here would work. And there's the issue of the minimum, and there's the issue of the table, which I think pretty much everybody was in favor of the table. So I feel that's pretty straightforward, and then there's the issue of the minimum, which is the one thing left to discuss. So now we've got another thing to discuss here, if we want to go around the room, on
I agree with Mariah.
I think it's hard to say without seeing some numbers and examples, like it's kind of hard, I don't really know what the difference is really. I think when we talked about this before, I said I'd rather get the credit for the unit, so, so towards a moratorium. I mean, I'm fine with what's drafted here instead of changing it. Don't fuss with the table.
Anyone else want to talk about this one?
Can everyone else just say if they'd rather do area or 830G? Because then I think we can pretty quickly decide where we want to keep that in the current draft. I feel like we could put this item to bed pretty quick.
I'd rather see us get some credit. I think.
Okay,
But I
so
agree with,
Wherever you just.
Commissioner Constantino said she'd rather see us get credit.
but I agree with Joe that without seeing, like, you just made this very easy for us with this
Right.
chart. It's pretty, easy to see, but if we need to see some kind of.
Is there anyone else that would like to pursue this topic further?
There is a chart, like, that's a pretty readily available. I mean, I can't put my hands on it right this second because I have to go through a lot of images, but I know I've looked at it before at the table that tells you what the numbers are, comparison table. It shouldn't be something too hard to get a hold of.
Okay. All right, so I think, again, I'm trying to get us to the point where we have some consensus to move forward with something. And I think I heard, as I said, at least 4 or 5 voices around the table that support basically this draft that excludes our AAA and our AA. Add the table instead of 14%, because the table makes more sense, the low numbers, table that was on the screen here. And now I think the only thing where a few people said, and including me, I'll say, I think it might make sense to push the number a little higher than the 4-unit minimum. But I also heard some voices saying that they like the 4-unit minimum. So on the 4-unit minimum, I think just to try to get us to a concluding point on that, if somebody wants to make a motion for what the new minimum should be, and then maybe we could have some discussion and drive some consensus around that.
I make a motion to move it to 6, only because it's true, we don't have very many large developments here, but I also believe that if you're only building 4 units, it might be financially extremely difficult to make the math work, and that'll kill the development or drive it to 830G. So I think the number should be 6.
Okay. So there's a specific suggestion, a motion here to be seconded, to essentially edit, and this would be a rather simple edit. It's in the first line of our basic requirement, resulting in the creation of 4 or more dwelling units. This would just become 6 or more dwelling units, and it would refer to the matrix that we already have, and we just cut off the first 3 couple numbers, so it would start at 6. I think that's a pretty straightforward suggestion. I'm not agreeing with it or disagreeing, I'm just trying to clarify for folks. Does anybody?
Would you be willing to amend your motion to 5?
Maybe. How would other people feel?
It's ready for a second if somebody agrees straight up, or,
Do other people just want to say quickly what they think?
I'm now on that, for the reason I said before, with the cul-de-sac. No, it's just going to just make it easy for more.
I hate to do this, I don't hear what you're saying.
I'm sorry, John, I said, I disagree, as I said before, I don't think so. I think it'll push more of these 5-unit cul-de-sacs, access ways with no benefit to the town. So I disagree with raising that.
does anybody want to second it? I mean, that's again, I'm not to be rude, but I want to move us forward. So like, if one person says something and nobody's even willing to second, then the idea doesn't have traction.
I would think that the way you have it here with 4 is something like
Okay. Okay.
I was preferring 4 as well, but I would be willing to do 5, but I mean, I'd rather just what's here.
Okay. All right, then what I would appreciate from somebody, just again to get us to the point where we can move this one, I think we'll vote on it again, but if I could have a motion from somebody to redraft this with the RAAA and the AA, with the matrix, I think that's what has the momentum here. We could do that, and by the way, I don't need the motion because we've been doing this discussion before, but what I would appreciate is a motion so we could vote on just the idea of redrafting it. We would also get this final scrub from Tom Beecher, which will involve some work. I don't want to do that if we're still dilly-dallying ourselves with our opinions. So I want to kind of get us to a near final draft.
If we see since we're in the middle of this, we see now, because I've asked this once before on something else, I see I believe that's a typo up there, like that there's a word missing, and since we're taking this whole section apart.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
the
that's a
missing one?
simple typo, we should
Okay,
catch it.
so,
So
I-
of, between
Yes.
development of additional housing zones, under the definitions.
just in the first one, Alice, up in
Yeah,
the
we'll catch
first.
that.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion to keep everything except change it to 5 instead of 4, because that'll make the odds higher. Or if we keep 4, then go to the area median income. But I would say, move it to 5. I'm gonna make a motion to keep the document as is, add the chart, but change the number to 5. Anyone second?
Okay, I'll take it.
Hey, that's the way this stuff gets done. Compromise. Okay,
What did you do? Did you
I just
change
made
the
it
area?
5. No, I just changed the 4 minimum to 5 minimum. That was the
so the motion's been made and it has been seconded to advance to a final draft, including legal review of the regulation that accepts our AAA and our AA.
Did we
And
discuss
and
that?
it's,
Yeah.
Like, you didn't give your opinion on that, but I-
I'm clarifying the motion for a second. The motion's been made and seconded to move to a final draft that accepts, that excludes our AAA and our AA. That applies under the basic requirements, section 1, to 5 or more dwelling units instead of 4 or more dwelling units. And the 14% in the next line would be replaced by a reference to the matrix, the table that we've shared. Because I just want to clarify the motion, that's what you two
That
are
is- that is
first
the
and
motion.
second.
Yeah.
Now we can discuss.
I think she also included the area.
No, she was saying
No,
that, she was
it
like
was
trying
on
to
the
horse
side.
trade, if,
Yeah.
you know, if you're not willing to do that, then
Okay.
do the other thing. That's the motion that's been made and seconded, to move to a final draft on this, and to get legal review on that draft. Is there any discussion about that motion?
What happened to the idea of defining this thing by the sewer district?
We talked about that last time, maybe too briefly, so I'll take your criticism if that's the case, but my concern with doing that was that the sewer district has, not that it does on a daily basis, but has the potential to be a little bit changeable if we expand, if we expand the infrastructure, and it's not really necessarily well known on a map by all people, whereas the zones are much more easy to understand by a lot of people. And if you really define it by sewer district, John, with all due respect, I think what you're saying is the poor people have, like worse shit than rich people. I don't think that the sewer district is the issue. Nothing that we're doing in this regulation increases density. So you still have to, when you build, you still have to build within the regulation. So if you can build 4 units today, you can build 4 units tomorrow on the same piece of property. All we're saying is, well, now it's 5 units today, 5 units tomorrow. All we're saying is one of them has to be affordable. So to define it by the sewer district seems to just say that for some reason, people with lower income are more in need of a sewer. So whereas defining it by the zones, excluding the zones that plus we also have zones like MSDD and et cetera, that may or may not be on the sewer district, but are intentionally, are designed for this type of housing. So I think for all those reasons, I think their concern was more, this really doesn't seem to make sense on a AAA or a AA lot because of the value of that land. And so this is the more simple approach.
I have to accept what you say, I don't agree with it, I think it's better to define it as a sewer district, because that tells folks what it is we think where we think we want to go with this concept. And I think that suggesting that only eliminating the AAA and the AA sends a message that, at least for me, is not appropriate. I don't think we ought to encourage the application for development in the unsewered area. I think we ought to keep it to the sewered area. But
This is not encouraging any application. This is saying that when an application comes in, it has to have this criteria. In fact, it's, as we've heard on the record, so I don't mind saying it again. In fact, this doesn't encourage anything. It actually does have a marginal discouragement. It does create a little bit of extra cost to develop in town. There's no doubt in that, economically. Today I can build 10 units in this spot, or 5, and then tomorrow, when I go to build those same 10 units, I have to make, 1 or 2 of them affordable. Clearly, that's got an economic impact, and we're saying that the economic impact is worthwhile. That's what we're doing here. So I don't think we're encouraging development at all. I think we're actually quite the opposite. You're putting a little bit of extra economic pause, economic disincentive to developing.
all right.
I'm not saying that just by myself. I do believe that, but I think we've also had testimony to that effect from a lot of builders, for instance. All right, but we do have a motion on the table made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on that before we move to a vote?
I'm still concerned about, I still don't see how it's not gonna encourage more building in the other area. I still think,
You're mumbling.
sorry, John, I was trying to get just a little bit more on the RAAA and RAA, excluding that.
You're concerned
Well, I'm
that by
thinking that they
excluding
don't want,
those,
that builders don't want to do any affordable units, so then it's just gonna push more building into that area, and then take away green space for the town. I'm
well,
so kinda holding to that.
this edit does certainly make it retains the profitability of developing these zones.
Right,
They
but.
can already build in those zones.
Right,
and
but
the-
Yeah.
the regulation, again, let's not be coy about it, the regulation creates an extra financial cost to developers in Ridgefield. It
Oh, yeah.
does certainly take margin away, there's no doubt about that.
I was
And so-
I was disagreeing that this is gonna cause more people to build more houses in the residential zones. I don't think it's gonna do that. They can already build
There's
there.
zoning in place, like you can only build so many houses on a plot of land. The math either works financially or it doesn't, like, the margins are not huge, so you're not gonna, it's not like they're making millions of dollars on this house. There's barely a margin there, so if they have to build affordable, they will not do the project.
Right.
And if you can only build 3 instead of 4 because they wanna get away from this, the math might not work because the land costs enough money. So it's so close that I don't think it's ever gonna encourage more.
Yeah, I don't think it encourages more,
Yeah.
but it does not discourage where in other zones, there is a little bit of an extra cost to developing in Ridgefield, and that's not going to be the case in our AAA or Dublin. All right, any further discussion? I just want to keep us eye on time a little bit. We have a motion made and seconded. And this is again, not to vote on to clarification for everybody, we're not voting on the regulation. We have a motion made and seconded to clarify our next step for drafting a final draft and getting legal review on that, which you know, it takes time and money, so we want to do that on something that people feel really good about. Okay? All in favor? Any opposed?
I'm still asking a question about that, so it doesn't really matter.
We want to be opposed then?
Yeah, because
Okay.
I'm still concerned about,
Ms. O'Cronley, you want to, just for the record, are you in favor
Oh,
of the final?
what's the vote at?
It's, the motion carries either way, I'm asking for the record.
Oh, I'm opposed.
Okay, all right,
could you change also the number to 5?
all right, the motion carries 5-2. Ms. O'Cronley and Ms. Constantino object to the moving of the final draft for the reasons that they've stated. Let me move on with our agenda, so we have two other, yep.
Could we get some numbers around the percent of lands?
Yes, I will do that for the next one. So for the record, Ben asked, can we please get the numbers on the percentage of land covered by the different zone types? I know I've seen that before, I just don't have it locked in my memory, so I'll find it for you. It's available somewhere, maybe even in the POCD. I just don't have it in my head. Okay,